Welcome to tonight's live stream. I am going to get started in a minute. I just need a minute to let everybody know that the stream is on the air.
Netflix, Amazon, and
Okay, now that I have promoted the live stream on social media, I'm gonna wait a few minutes for people to come in. So right now I'm experimenting with a different time slot because a lot of people were not coming in for the lives at 11 p.m. So I decided to move it down about 30 minutes. I noticed that there's a lot of congestion as related to different live streams going on Friday nights. So that's why I've decided to shift gears a bit because I just don't want to start a show where there's nobody here. So I'm going to take a minute to go into the perfunctory for tonight's show. I'm going to give everybody a progress report on the upcoming John Haynes comic, John Haynes at Death's Door. I spoke with Antonio Balderi this week, and he sent me the art for the cover. And right now, all I'm waiting for is for the colors to be put on the cover, and I'll be ready to launch the John Haynes at Death's Door Kickstarter. Hopefully, I want to get it out here either mid-May, or I might want to go out and launch it early June. So I'm hoping to get the John Haynes Death's Door Kickstarter ready to go. And as soon as I get the final cover, I'll be able to get this comic out to you guys, and I'll have it ready to go. And as I've been working on the John Haynes at Death's Door art with Antonio Balderi, I've also been working on trying to put together some nice rewards to go along with it on Kickstarter. And I've also been working on some stretch goal rewards as well. So that's other things I've been working on that's related to the John Haynes at Death's Door comic. And I'm hoping to get everything together so I can give you guys a really great Kickstarter. Now, the SJS Direct 2021 books are now available on Amazon.com right now, and you can pick up ISIS Legacy in paperback and Kindle format right now. And this is the 20th book in the ISIS series, and this book celebrates 10 years of the Goddess Next Door in print. So if you want to pick up a great positive story about the importance of a woman's role in preserving a family's legacy, you can pick up ISIS Legacy on Amazon.com today. Now, the next book in the SJS Direct 2022 catalog is Esteem Horror of the Hyena Woman. And this was a book that was inspired by one of my Facebook friends from Africa. He gave me the idea for this story as we talked about a project he was working on featuring the Hyena Man lore, which is an African werewolf. And I decided to incorporate it into this Esteem series story, which is inspired by the discussions we had and by many of my favorite 90s police shows like NYPD Blue and my all time favorite Disney's animated series, Gargoyles. So this one is an action packed African American fantasy story that's contemporary. And I really want to see everybody pick up this Horror of the Hyena Woman story. And you can pre order your copy of East Team Horror of the Hyena Woman right now on Kindle, or pick up a copy in paperback right now. Now, East Team Horror of the Hyena Woman will officially be available on May 13th. That's Friday the 13th. And you can pick up this East Team Horror of the Hyena Woman on Friday, May 13th, officially. Now, with all of that perfunctory done, I'm going to get into tonight's topic, which was requested by one of my viewers. Now, one of my viewers wanted me to talk about the All Elite Wrestling, or AEW, and the current state of AEW. Now, I have been watching All Elite Wrestling ever since it made its debut 3 years ago, and I have really been satisfied with the product. And I would have to say that AEW was necessary because the WWE monopoly, as related to wrestling leagues being on television, had made pro wrestling extremely stale because all of the sports entertainment aspects of your WWE created a very, very boring product. I mean, when you look at WWE right now, it is an absolutely very boring product where we get to see the same wrestlers over and over again, and the storylines are just absolutely flat and predictable. So when AEW came along with Tony Khan, it represented some real competition for WWE since the days of WCW and Ted Turner. So this was the first serious wrestling league that would be out here to compete with the WWE. And I was really happy to see a competing organization finally come out after 20 years since the WWE went out here and bought WCW and ECW back in the early 2000s. And when WWE bought WCW and ECW, what that did was create a monopoly. And sadly, over the last 20 years of that monopoly, the WWE product has gotten more and more stale with each passing year. I mean, I remember when it first started really getting bland, and that was around 2010 or so, or 2011, when we got the Super John Cena. And this John Cena was basically unbeatable, and it just really got boring and repetitive. I mean, every pay-per-view was basically the same thing over and over again, guys jobbing to John Cena, and it really wasn't very entertaining, and it really wasn't very compelling. So that's one of the other problems I had with WWE, and the problems just got worse over time. And around the late 20 teens, that's when it really started to get stale because your Vince McMahon just kept fixating on Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar. But around 2019 or so, AEW came along, and AEW has really put together some solid product in the 3 years they've been on the air. So I really liked a lot of what AEW was offering. And one of the things that they did offer was giving some of this fresh talent an opportunity to actually be the stars that they could actually be. A lot of guys like your Cody Rhodes, when he was working for AEW, were really given a chance to shine, and a lot of other guys who were not really given that opportunity to shine, they really started to really show that they had some talent. And AEW introduced us to a lot of wrestlers we didn't see on a place like WWE. We got to see Kenny Omega, who was absolutely fantastic. And we got to see a lot of other wrestlers who really didn't get a chance to really showcase their skills. I mean, this was the first time I got to see a lot of guys like the SCU, which was Scorpio Sky and Frankie Kazarian. Now I knew of Christopher Daniels from his work in TNA, and we really got to get to see a lot of young, fresh talent, and that was one of the best things about AEW was we got to see a showcase of young, fresh talent. Now the median age of an AEW wrestler is very young, and that's one of the other positives about AEW is that you've got a lot of young, fresh talent, and that young, fresh talent can learn from a lot of the other older, seasoned veterans like Chris Jericho and many others. So there's a good foundation as related to AEW, and they have been building very slowly on that platform. And one of the things I like about the way that they're building their platform is that they're focusing on storytelling. Now, storytelling, as I see it at WWE, has been lost for a number of years, and we really don't get to see anything as related to crafting a story around the wrestler's character. Now, back in the 80s, when I used to watch WWF, there was a focus on storytelling, and that focus on storytelling was one of the reasons why Vince McMahon's WWF became one of the most popular wrestling shows on the air. So as a kid, one of the things that made WWF compelling was storytelling, and I was really glad to see your Tony Khan focusing on storytelling. Now, he focuses on two aspects of storytelling I really love. And one aspect that he focuses on is long form storytelling. Now, long form storytelling is where you take the time to build a story over an extended period of time. And as you're building the story over that extended period of time, what you're doing is creating the heat as related to the story and allowing the characters to come out and build up over time and allowing us to have a big payoff at the end of the day. So that's something I really like about Tony Khan's AEW is he focuses on long form storytelling and building up the story as related to the characters, and that leads to a really solid payoff at the end of the story, and it makes the story very compelling. Now, another thing I like about his whole story aspect is he focuses on trying to put a value on the title, and putting the value on the title, that's something that really needs to be a core component of a competitive wrestling league. When you have a wrestling league, the title needs to be the core focus, and it needs to be the thing that everybody is aspiring to do, because it's like Stone Cold Steve Austin said about the WWE title. If you're not here for the WWE title, you have no business being here. And as I see it, most of the wrestlers there are there for that AEW championship, and that is the focus of a good wrestling league. So I like that aspect of AEW, that they have really focused on long form storytelling. They have focused on going out here and making the title important, and they've gone out here and made it where their wrestlers are young and talented and showcasing a lot of that young talent and having that young talent do something I really like to see, in some cases, working with veterans towards improving their skills. Now, there are some issues with AEW that I see that are a bit of a problem as a writer myself. And one of the big problems I saw in the beginning was the women's division. Now, the women's division at AEW has not really been booked very strong, and it really hasn't had a good depth of talent. Now, the booking on the women's division is one of the serious problems at AEW, because they really do not give a lot of the more talented women wrestlers a chance to go out here and show what they can do. And oftentimes they push a lot of mediocre talents to the forefront. Now, I remember early on watching AEW, one of the bigger problems that they had was they just kept pushing Nyla Rose, and they keep pushing her. And the whole thing is that, yeah, you need a heel to have the girl faces beat up, but you need to go out here and find another heel because everybody is getting really tired of seeing Nyla Rose, because Nyla Rose is every week we see her, and it's time to give somebody else a chance to go out here and be the bad guy. I would rather see them do something with Jamie Hayter or somebody else, but it's time for a new bad guy to be the principal bad guy. I mean, she's an AEW original, but she's getting really boring and long in the tooth. And that's one of Tony Khan's big mistakes, is he just keeps pushing this same woman over and over. And he also almost made that same mistake with Britt Baker. Britt Baker, early on, he kept pushing her as a face, but she wasn't getting over as a face, but he just kept pushing her, and she wasn't actually very ready to go in the ring. That's another problem with the women's division. They oftentimes push a lot of people to the forefront who just aren't ready. Their skills weren't there, like Britt Baker's skills really weren't there. And another person whose skills really weren't there was your Big Swole. Now, your Big Swole, if anybody remembers AEW for the last 2 years, she was pushed heavily on AEW. She had a feud with Britt Baker. She had a feud with Diamante. But your Big Swole was a big dud. And she was a big dud because she really didn't have the skills to even do basic moves. I mean, I remember watching many Big Swole matches, and she was just stumbling about the ring. She had a really weak finisher. I think it was called Dirty Dancing, and then she switched to the Texas Cloverleaf, but she couldn't execute the moves. But your Tony Khan pushed her, and because she could talk a little bit, but the whole thing is your Big Swole really wasn't very good overall, and her work ethic really stank. I mean, your Big Swole, she really didn't want to go out here and learn how to talk and work a crowd. She didn't want to go out here and develop her character further. She didn't want to go out here and put in the work as related to improving her ring work. And she didn't want to go out here and try to get her skills together. And that's one of the big problems with Big Swole. And as her contract was expiring, she wanted to say, oh, it was about race. But as somebody who has watched her ring work for the last 3 years, I can tell you that it wasn't about race that prevented her from moving up in AEW, because they were setting to give her a big push. They had put her in major feuds, but the problem with Big Swole was the fact that she just didn't want to put the work in. She didn't want to go out here and try to improve, and that's the big difference between her and other wrestlers like Britt Baker. I mean, Britt Baker, they pushed her as a face, but when she heard that her ring work was not being received by the fans, what your Britt Baker did was at least she went out here and practiced and learned how to get better in the ring. And she also learned how to work to improve her mic skills and learning how to work the crowd. So you could respect Britt Baker because she put the work in and she improved dramatically. And that was one of the things that made her strong, was the fact that she was able to get better and improve her craft. Same thing like the See Truth Revelator is talking about Red Velvet. I remember watching Red Velvet during the pandemic period. She started out as a jobber. I mean, she was getting really beat up and losing matches, but Red Velvet had a work ethic, and that's another thing that you could respect about her. I mean, Red Velvet has improved dramatically. I mean, she has put in the work, and she's become a very solid worker in the ring. So your Red Velvet has been improved dramatically over the years. And she has become a very solid worker. So a lot of people, they were complaining, oh, about Big Swole and trying to make it racial, but it wasn't racial. The whole thing is she didn't want to put the work in and improve. Now the women's division, it's gotten a little bit better than it was, but when it first started out, it was just a complete shambles. But the women's division does need better stories. I mean, when I look at the women's division, they do have the talent now. They have good, solid wrestlers like Thunder Rosa, who needs to keep the belt for a while because she is the face they need. I remember watching her in NWA when it was on YouTube, and I said that this woman is going to be a star on the level of Eddie Guerrero. So when I look at Thunder Rosa, she's the right face because she's got the ring skills and she has the mic work. And what AEW needs to do with her is let her character develop, because that's a big problem they've had. Even though they've had, Britt Baker as champ and Sheeta as champ, they haven't had somebody they could go out here and make a face to represent the company. And Thunder Rosa could represent the company because they've built her up nicely as related to the long form storytelling. The entire story with Thunder Rosa told ever since the whole St. Patrick's Day conflict that has built up very nicely, and that showed that there was some great long form storytelling overall. So that she's somebody who I think is going to be big in AEW, but they just need to really focus on giving her some strong opponents and some strong feuds. And I think the Serena Deeb feud might be very solid because they have a nice little build up from the NWA women's belt, and they also have some heat from previous matches. So it's a nice organic feud to start to build up into for Double or Nothing. But what your AEW has to do is they have to focus on creating some more female heels. I mean, I do like your Jade Cargill and the Baddies. That's really looking like a good faction and a great way to get Kiera Hogan and Red Velvet over. It's a really good start for building up a faction. So I see what Tony is doing with Jade Cargill. He's trying to use her to build up a faction now that she's already over. So I see what he's doing with her right there. And that's going to really work as related to improving AEW's heels. But they really do need more heels as related to the women's division. And they also need to go out here and help get some of these women on the microphone. Now, Jade is good on the microphone. Thunder Rosa is good on the microphone. But they need others to learn how to work the stick, because your character really doesn't get popular until you learn how to work the stick and work the crowd. Because if you can work a crowd with the stick, you don't have to work as hard in the ring. And that's something that your Tony Khan highly has to think about as related to the women's division. And I like seeing things like he did with Tony Storm and your Jamie Hayter. That's setting up to be a nice little mid-card feud. And I think that feud, it could help get both of those talents over if they do it right. So the women's division is improving. It's not on the level of TNA knockouts yet. Now, when I think about top-level women's wrestling, it's the TNA knockouts. TNA knockouts were on the same level as WWE's top men, and the storytelling there was just as compelling as WWE's top men. But AEW's women's division, it's coming along pretty nicely, but the whole big problem with them, as I see it, is they got to get more of their talent, more matches, one, so that they can improve in the ring, on TV, and two, they have to go out here and get a lot of these women on the mic. The only way your character is going to get over in today's modern wrestling is if you are on the mic. And if you're on the mic, you can go out here and talk to the audience and connect with the audience. So the women's division, it started out a bit of a mess, but it's made a lot of progress. And there's only one way for them to go, is up. They've got the right person with the belt. They've got the right person with the secondary belt. But right now, as I see it, what they need for the current state of AEW as related to the women's division is they got to get the right feuds together. I mean, right now with Thunder Rosa, if they go out here and have her facing off against Serena Deeb, there's a pretty good organic feud there for the next couple of months. And with your TBS championship, that's where they need a baby face who can go out here and challenge your Jade Cargill. That's one of the problems there is that, yes, your Jade has improved. Her character is very compelling, and her ring work is getting to become a bit better. But Jade really needs somebody to feud with, and she needs that person to feud with in order to get over. So when I look at the women's title, you got the right person in Serena Deeb, but you need another hero to go out here and face off against Jade Cargill. So as rated for the state of the women's division, that's where I see that they have the issues, and they really need to focus on developing a story for both women so that we can care about them. I mean, we already like Thunder Rosa, we already like Jade Cargill, even though she's a bad guy and she's got her baddies, but we need a story to really make us care. Now, that's another problem with AEW overall as related to part of their men's division, is that a lot of the storytelling, while it is long form, is a bit scattershot. And one of the big problems as related to the scattershot storytelling has to do with the TNT Championship. Now, the TNT Championship, when it was introduced, was considered to be a high-level belt that had great value, and that value was established first by Cody Rhodes, then by the late, I got to remember his name, Brody Lee. That's who he was. The late Brody Lee. I mean, Brody Lee really he really helped out a lot when he was alive. I mean, he basically put the Dark Order over, and he also added value to the TNT Championship. And then you had Darby Allin, who had a very strong run with the belt. But the guy who really put the TNT Championship over was Miro. Now, Miro, when he first came to AEW, he had just been released by WWE. They had him in a really lame gamer gimmick, but when they made him the God's champion and he got the TNT belt, he basically got super over, and he brought the belt up to a level I haven't seen since Macho Man Randy Savage had the Intercontinental Championship back in the 80s. I mean, he made the belt feel like it was a prize worth having, and he had these really spectacular matches, and I could really see that character becoming a world champion character and a main event character. Unfortunately, Miro had an injury, and he couldn't wrestle for a while, and they gave the belt to Sammy Guevara. And when they gave the belt to Sammy Guevara, that's when everything as related to the TNT Championship and the mid-card all just completely fell apart. Now, when I first saw Sammy in the title battling for that TNT Championship, I thought it was going to take him into the stratosphere. Unfortunately, your Sammy just wasn't ready as related to holding a singles title. Your Sammy Guevara, while he had some really good ring work, he really didn't have good mic skills, and he could not work a crowd, and he just came across as really awkward as related to cutting promos. And if you're going to work as related to the mid-card and be a singles competitor, you have to have really sharp mic work in order to get your feuds over. So that was a big problem with Sammy Guevara. He really wasn't where Miro was. I mean, Miro had experience as related to being a United States champion, so he understood how to make a mid-card belt work, and he understood his role in the mid-card was to get that belt over as something prestigious, and he also understood that your mic work has to be on that high level. So when Miro was coming out here saying he was God's favorite champion and talking about being the Redeemer and practically destroying people in the ring, it made him look like a credible threat, and it made us take him seriously as somebody who was dangerous. And when I looked at him again, it took me back to Macho Man Randy Savage, when Macho Man Randy Savage had the Intercontinental belt for over a year, and he was basically destroying people left and right. And he was up there talking of, and when he would talk, he would go out here and cut these promos that would get you into his match. And somebody mentioned, Ricky Steamboat and WrestleMania 3. I remember watching that match, and that was a classic form of long form storytelling. I mean, when you watched Macho Man and Ricky Steamboat, that really was that was a compelling story, because we saw all of it build up over a year, and then it paid off in WrestleMania 3 in that classic match where Ricky Steamboat won the Intercontinental Championship. But it wouldn't have had a value hadn't it been for Macho Man Randy Savage putting the belt over and basically showing that this was his reason for working in the ring. And that's what Miro brought to the TNT Championship. And he brought the TNT Championship to another level with his mic work, his promos, and then on top of it, his ring work. So Miro was ready to go out here and not only be a TNT Championship, but he was also understanding his focus was to get up to the main event. So Miro had a better focus and understanding of his role than Sammy. Sammy had been in the inner circle. He had been in different factions, but he didn't understand what the belt meant. And the whole thing is, he just came across as really awkward. And while he had the popularity, he just, as I see it, was not ready to be on a mid-card level just yet. I mean, he was ready for possibly lower mid-card where they have Dante Martin right now, but he's not ready for the upper mid-card and a mid-card belt like Miro was. So that really showed with Sammy, and Sammy, really, his whole issues with the TNT Championship have really lowered the value of the belt. His awkward promos, his awkward feuds with Cody Rhodes. Yes, he had some good matches with Cody Rhodes, and Cody was trying to put some prestige back on the belt. Unfortunately, Sammy just wasn't ready for prime time. And even though he and Cody had a great ladder match as related to their final match, Cody's final match in AEW, he just wasn't getting over, and it's been a problem. Now, they have tried to put the belt on Scorpio Sky in an effort to try to salvage the title. Unfortunately, I don't think that Scorpio is ready for the title just yet. Yes, Scorpio was a great tag team champion, but he hasn't had enough time to really build up, and that's a big problem with Scorpio. Yes, he's gotten the wins on the book, but his character isn't very compelling. He's very good in the ring. He's been very solid with his matches, but the character isn't there. And that's one of the big problems with the TNT Championship. Ever since Miro dropped the belt, they haven't had that big character that can get the belt over. I mean, they've put a lot of the belts on these guys who are, yes, they're very good technical wrestlers, but their mic skills are weak, and their mic skills are a problem. But when you're doing storytelling, your character has to be compelling, and that's a problem with AEW's mid-card as related to their belts. The guys just aren't there as related to their character. Now, that's another problem that's been plaguing their tag team division. And their tag team division had started out strong with SCU getting the belts, and they had some really solid matches in the beginning. And Frankie and Scorpio, they could work the mic decently. And then we went into, I believe it was the Young Bucks got the belts. And the Young Bucks, as related to being a part of the Elite, they were able to cut some decent promos and get the belts over. So they were doing a good job of making the belts feel valuable. And then when they gave it to the Lucha Brothers, that's when belts really started to have value because the Lucha Brothers had built up a nice amount of heat over time, and they had managed to get themselves over and become very popular. So when you had the Lucha Brothers getting the belts, that's when the belts really started to get over. Now, after they gave the belts to the Lucha Brothers, there was a plan to give them to the Jurassic Express. Now, the Jurassic Express are popular, but they have a problem. The Jurassic Express, while they're really cool looking guys that are over with the kids, they really are not really good at the mic work and promotion. And again, character is important when you have wrestlers out here. Your character really has to be strong. And one of the problems I saw with the Jurassic Express is, yes, they're good in the ring, but the mic work is a problem. And if you can't work the stick and work the crowd, this is going to keep your characters from getting over. Working the crowd is part of everything, and there's a big problem with if your tag team champions can't work a crowd. And the sad part is they have better tag teams like Red Dragon waiting out here, and they have also the what formerly known as 2.0. And you need a tag team that can work a crowd with the mic, because if you don't have a tag team that can work the crowd with the mic, then nobody's going to care about the belts. And that's where several of the problems are AEW's having right now. Yeah, they've got the titles on guys who can go out here and they can wrestle a good match, but they don't really know how to develop their characters or move their characters forward as related to a character transformation arc. That's something that a good writer would be able to help them with, and that's something that your Tony Khan really hasn't really thought about as related to his wrestlers, is working on their characters. So when I look at certain wrestlers, like I look at Red Dragon, they're very good on the mic and they're good at putting their characters out here. They're somebody I would put a tag team belt on, because they can work the crowd and get them riled up, get them hot. And I would want to put that TNT belt on somebody like a Miro. Once again, they say that he's healthy, and I would say get that belt back on him as soon as possible, because you need to have your belts on people who can go out here and work a crowd. Now, Miro can work the crowd. Ricky Starks can work a crowd, and they got him in the broadcast booth on Rampage, but he needs to be given a huge push. I look at Ricky Starks, and I've been watching Ricky Starks ever since NWA when it was on YouTube, and another guy who I could believe could definitely be a star, and a guy who I believe is ready for that TNT belt. If you don't want to put it on Miro, I believe they need to put it on Starks, because Ricky Starks is definitely ready for a TNT championship. And I believe he could bring it back up to the level of prestige that Miro had it up to. And he could go out here and put the mic work in that would get people emotional and riled up. I mean, when I look at Ricky Starks, he's definitely ready, but it's just that they have to go out here and get Ricky Starks that opportunity. I mean, he's in the middle of a really good feud with Swerve Strickland and your Keith Lee, and everybody in that feud is working the way that they're supposed to work. I really like the feud with Ricky Starks and Swerve Strickland and Keith Lee and Hobbs, and all four of them are really doing a great job with this feud, and you can see where things are going, but it's just exceptionally well done. So when I look at Ricky Starks, he's in the right place. And yeah, he's going to have to break away from Team Charles Revelator. He definitely is going to have to break away from them, but not just yet. I mean, I see him in the same place that The Rock was when he was in Nation of Domination before he broke away and became The Rock. I mean, he's on that level. He's getting up there. He just needs an opportunity to go out here and have that feud that really puts him over. And the feud with Keith Lee could definitely put him over. And I could really see him cooking and roasting people on the mic. And he's got the skills to be a star in AEW, but AEW needs to give him the opportunity to go out here and be that star. So I look at him, I look at Hobbs, and I saw Hobbs when he was jobbing in Florida, and he's come a long way too. I mean, powerhouse Hobbs, he's come a long way. His ring work has become really strong, and the thing is that his character really needs to develop a bit more and start to learn how to work the mic. But he's on his way. He's coming up as a star, and I believe he's going to be a big star because Hobbs really he has that work ethic, he has that drive, and this is he's on his way to becoming a really solid performer in the mid card. I could easily see him challenging for a TNT Championship once they get him over. Now, Hook is a phenomenon. I really like the Hook character. They're doing the right things with Hook as related to Team Taz. All of the Team Taz members have been put together and developed. Their characters have been developed well, with the exception of Brian Cage. But Brian Cage had a problem, and again, it's a problem with a lot of AEW wrestlers. Brian Cage could not speak on the mic, and again, in today's modern wrestling, you have to know how to work the mic. So that's a major problem with Brian Cage, and we haven't seen Brian Cage for months on end, next to a year. But the problem with him was, even though he was a big star in TNA, we didn't get to know him, and we didn't get to know him because he did not create a character that could make us care, and that's one of the core problems with a lot of AEW stars is they really don't create characters. They just go around, as some people say, flipping in the ring. And yeah, flipping in the ring is really nice, and the spots are really nice, but you have to understand that wrestling is not just about the ring work. The ring work tells one part of the story, because in wrestling there are three components to story. There is the character you're developing. There is the story as related to the storyline, and then there is the wrestling ring. So those are the three components of the story. And one of the problems with AEW is they really need to start focusing on character development. I would like to see more of the backstage segments. I would like to see more of the mic promos in the ring. I would like to see more as related to, backstage segments. This is how we get to know the character that the wrestler is creating, and this is how we connect to the character as a person. So that's a big problem with AEW, is that they try to cram so many matches into a show that we really don't get to know the characters. And if we don't get to know the characters, then it's hard to care enough about the matches to be interested to watch everything build up and pay off to the pay-per-view. Now, that's one of the big problems that they're having with their main event right now, because there was an amazing build-up for after Kenny Omega got the belt, and the AEW Championship was managed very well, from Chris Jericho to, I believe it was Jon Moxley, to Kenny Omega. And Kenny Omega took the belt and made it very prestigious by having these 5-star matches. Unfortunately, after they built up the story for Kenny Omega as related to retaining the belt and then dropping it to Hangman Page, your Hangman Page has really not really gotten the belt over and shown it as prestigious. I mean, when I look at Hangman Adam Page's run as a champion, he's coming across as really like a mid-carder. What's sad is when Miro had the TNT belt, it felt like a main event match. He felt like a main event champion. But after Hangman Adam Page got the belt, he hasn't really felt like a world champion. He hasn't really put much prestige on the belt. And one of the problems has to do with his character. I mean, the cowboy character really has not really connected with the audience, and the cowboy character has been a bit boring. I mean, when I look at Hangman Adam Page, he has the same problem that Roman Reigns has, is that his character isn't very compelling, and because his character isn't very compelling, it's hard to get into him as a character, and that makes it where it's hard to care about his character. So your Hangman, he hasn't really been there as a character to really get you into the matches the way Chris Jericho did, the way Moxley did, and the way Omega just took the belt and took it to a higher level. I'm hoping that AEW does what I think they're going to do and give the belt to CM Punk, because CM Punk could definitely put some of that prestige back on the belt. And Hangman Adam Page, his character really needs to get some development. I mean, his character hasn't really found that voice. I mean, they were trying to do some things with him in Dark Order where they're saying they're trying to rebuild his confidence, but that character's transformation arc, as related to the Kenny Omega feud, it was built up, but the whole thing is he felt like a background character in his story. So you don't really feel like you're seeing a champion in front of you. I mean, when you look at guys like The Rock, Stone Cold, Hulk Hogan, or even guys like in AEW, Moxley or Jericho, they felt like champions. They felt like the belt meant something to them. But with Hangman Adam Page, you really don't feel like you're connecting to him, and you feel like you don't really care about him as a champion. He feels like somebody in the background as a champion. And yeah, they try to make it where he's like an underdog and he has to overcome, but you don't connect with him. And it's a major problem with Adam Page, because if you're the main event performer, the main event performer really needs to make his matches feel special. And he needs to make his matches feel special by going out here and being, like C Truth the Revelator saying, larger than life, because a larger than life wrestler, they're going to make you feel like this guy and the belt are important. And you don't really feel that with Adam Page. I mean, when you look at the last pay-per-view that they did, the main event didn't feel like it was something special. It didn't really feel like anything. If anything, the match of the night was considered basically one of the more mid-card matches. And that's not how you want to have your wrestling company. When you're running a wrestling company, you want your world champion to be a face of the company, a face who can excite people, a face that can get people really to talk about your brand and talk about your product. And that's not what I'm seeing with your Hangman Adam Page. Yes, he's an AEW original, but he suffers the same problem many AEW wrestlers suffer, and that is their characters are very boring. I mean, this is a core component that really has hurt a lot of AEW wrestlers, is that their characters aren't very strong. And then there are guys who are in the mid card like Starks who are very strong and they're not getting a push. I mean, there are people like Thunder Rosa, Starks. They can go out here and put together characters that can work a stick and work a crowd, and they have all the components together, but they're not really pushing them the way they need to be pushing them. What's going on, Gboot2786? Glad to see you here. Gboot2786 and I do a live stream every Thursday night at 9 p.m. And if you want to check out that live stream on Thursday nights, or check him out on Random Topic Sundays or Random Topic Tuesdays, you can check him out then. You can sub to Gboot786's channel by clicking the link in the chat. So I want you guys to go check out his channel. But I'm going to get back. I'm going to take a minute to talk to everybody. Thank you, Killingsley, for the super chat. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Soul Survivor, for the super chat. I really appreciate it. So want to thank everybody here. What's going on? Izargon7 and Amara Woods. What's going on? What's going on? Young Tito, and Soul Survivor, Frank B, Rocket Man, Rocky Matrix. Glad to see you all here. But I'm going to get back to what I was talking about as AEW. So All Elite Wrestling, yeah, they have a really solid product overall, but they have some problems as related to their characters. And again, you have to really know how to develop a character. You have to know how to craft a character in order to get the audience to care. Now, they've had some pretty, again, good wrestlers who have a good background and experience, but then what they do with a lot of different wrestlers is they really don't use them properly. Like I've seen them not use Murder Hawk Monster very well. I mean, Lance Archer, he's supposed to be a monster, but the problem is they job him out in every major match, and that really hurts his credibility. You would never see WWE jobbing out Kane at every top match that he has, because then you wouldn't go out here and have this monster appear to be credible. And that's another problem with your AEW, is that they have guys who are showing a lot of promise, like your Murder Hawk Monster, and what they do is they put them in some really weak sauce mid-card feuds when they take away a lot of their credibility, because if he's a monster, he needs to be destroying people, he needs to be working people over, and he needs to be seen as a credible threat. But every time you have a Murder Hawk Monster match where there's a title involved, he winds up losing, and then you have your Murder Hawk Monster. He recently lost to Wardlow, and I like the way they're building up Wardlow and making him into a possible superstar, but they have to go out here and follow through and give him some sort of major push that shows he's a threat. And I'm hoping they do that with this feud with Wardlow, where they show that he overcomes as MJF, and your MJF is beaten by your Wardlow, and he goes on to become a single superstar. Wardlow has shown he has the mic. He's a total package that the AEW desperately needs. He's got the mic skills. He's got the ring work. He's got the look. And he's got the character that we're interested in. And they really need to do right by Wardlow, because he's got everything that they need. And he's somebody who also could be, they desperately need for their mid card, who could add some prestige to their TNT Championship. When I look at the TNT Championship, there's a lot of contenders there, but you've got the belt on Sammy and now Scorpio Sky, but none of those guys that they have the belt on, they just were not, they're not strong enough. But Wardlow definitely is strong enough. And if they just give this, and after this feud, have him go after the belt, he could possibly be also somebody who could possibly be AEW's next star. So that's somebody who I see could be, again, a promising person for AEW in the mid card. I also see Dante Martin, since Darius is injured again. You could put him in the singles mix. I mean, he's somebody who has great ring work, but he has to work on his character and his mic skills. And at this point, after his brother's been injured again, he really has to start working on developing his character, because that's, again, what's going to get you over. And he's another someone who could definitely be a star. Now, C-Truth Revelator makes the point, yeah, if CM Punk wins the title, yeah, if he's a heel champ, it would be a good thing. But I think they want to make MJF the heel champ, and that would be interesting. I could see MJF being the heel champ because he's super over. I mean, he's the bad guy we love to hate, and he's another great character. And the whole thing is that with MJF, they definitely do need to, they're doing a slow burn on his story, but I see him as a guy who could be a major heel for AEW, who could take them to the next level. But they really do need to go out here and really do something about their champions, because their champions just aren't over. And when you have people more interested in lower card and mid card matches than they do your main event matches or matches for the belts, then you have a serious problem. And that's where AEW has a problem right now. They have a lot of the wrong people with the titles. And those people, yeah, they worked hard to get to that level. They had this storyline built up, but you need a person who can go out here and sell your company and be a face for your company. Thunder Rosa is a face for the company. She's perfect in the role of champion, and she's somebody who they could go out here and sell merchandise with, and she's somebody who could represent the company as a face. Now, they need somebody in the TNT title, in that category. They need somebody in the world title in that category, but they don't have that right now. They had a great buildup with the stories over 2021, but 2022 they really have to focus on the image of AEW, and they have to focus on redefining what All Elite is, because yes, these wrestlers they have right now are okay, but they're not, as I see it, All Elite to show value in being All Elite. They have a lot of the talent in the mid card. That talent needs to be brought up. And when it comes down to the women's division, they really need to put a little bit more depth on it. They have the talent there, but they just need to go out here and develop it a little further, develop the characters a little further, because I would like to see Tony Storm and Jamie Hayter get some more development on their characters. They have the heat for the feud, but we need a reason to care about the feud, and we really need to get to know their characters. And that's another problem with AEW. They have to learn time management. Now, your AEW, they have a serious time management problem. They try to cram so many matches into the Dynamite and Rampage, but they really need to just start slowing things down as related to their shows. They really need to slow stuff down. Use 1 week to build up one set of feuds, use another week to build another set of feuds, and really focus on character development. One of the problems I'm seeing is that characters, they disappear and then they reappear, but they need to start focusing on a bit more of an organic transition where, yes, we have a storyline featuring these wrestlers this week, but then we segue into these other wrestlers and their matches, and that will help us be able to connect with the stories, and that will help the feuds flow a little bit more organically. So that's another issue that they're having as related to story, in that you're trying to cram so many matches into a show that you're not letting the storylines flow organically. And yeah, you've got a really big roster, but the whole thing is you have to know how to manage your roster. It's, again, that's all about leadership. You have to understand how to use your talent. And when you know how to manage your talent, that way you're going to be able to make sure that your talent stays healthy. Now, that's another problem I'm seeing with AEW with all of the spots and the spot fests. There's a real serious problem with all of the spots. I mean, we don't need tables every week. I would rather see a wrestler outsmarting an opponent or using some resourcefulness. But the spots, I believe, are absolutely unnecessary. There's a lot too many spots in many of these matches. You don't need to have a table every week. You don't need to have a steel chair every week. It just becomes repetitive and boring as I see it. But you don't need to have a major spot, because major spots, what this does is it puts wear and tear on your talent, and it makes it where your talent winds up getting injured and puts them at risk. Now, your Billy Gunn had talked about this. He says that they need to slow stuff down, and I have to agree with Billy Gunn after watching a lot of the matches. Yeah, a lot of the wrestlers there really need to slow down, because all of this going so fast with the flippity flip, all this is going to do is lead to a lot of botches. And I've watched a lot of AEW matches with botches, and it's putting these wrestlers at risk. I mean, I remember watching that tag match between the Jurassic Express and the Lucha Brothers, where Ray Phoenix got his arm twisted out of socket, and that was disturbing. I remember watching a Chris Statlander match where she botched a move, and if they got to learn how to work a lot safer in AEW. That's one of the things I really want to see in AEW, is working a lot safer, because when you work safer, you're looking out for the talent and you're making sure that, yeah, you're going to get the match with all of the great moves, but the whole thing is that everybody is working in a way where nobody is getting hurt, and people are able to, after the match, be able to get up and go home in one piece. So I look at all the ladder matches and all these other different type of matches. Yes, these gimmick matches get a lot of attention to people, but you got to think about your talent and think about their health in the long term. because if you don't think about their health in the long term, they're going to have a really bad botch. And if they have a bad botch, then what happens is that you might wind up injuring a major talent that you're going to need for a pay-per-view or a main event. Or you'll have something like with Kenny Omega where he was just so banged up from injuries that he cannot, he's out for about a year trying to recover from things. But you really don't need to do that if you work a little safer and work a lot easier. Then what happens is that you're going to have wrestlers who are healthy and able to perform in more matches, and they'll be able to perform for a longer time. So that's something that is key as related to AEW. I really want to see Tony Khan working on helping his talent work safer. I really want to see them work a lot safer. And I see guys who do work safe, like Penta and Ray Phoenix, until that botch. But the botch really was on Luchasaurus. But the whole thing is that some of their wrestlers, they're not working safe, and it's a problem. When I looked at Sammy Scorpio ladder match, that could have possibly severely injured Sammy. And again, a lot of these guys, they're going for the pop from the crowd, but you can't really go for the pop from the crowd. You really want to work safe because you don't want to be dealing with this injury when you're 35, 40 years old. And that's one of the disadvantages of having so much young talent is they're not understanding that a lot of this stuff can come back to get you later on. So that's why you want to work safe, and you want to try to, if you're going to get your spot, the whole thing is you can get a spot safer than going out here and pulling a crazy stunt. So that's something that people really need to think about as related to AEW, and I hope Tony Khan thinks about that. I mean, you really got to think about working your talent safer, and you really got to think about helping them out. Now, I also watched the AEW Dark, and I believe that show could be managed a lot better. I mean, AEW Dark, I mean, it's a place where they try to develop young talent, put some wins on people's records, but AEW Dark desperately needs stories, and AEW Dark desperately needs a Dark Championship, because just having guys out here beating up jobbers to warm up the crowd, that's nice. But when you have this show on YouTube, you could be building a YouTube audience with AEW Dark, and you could be going out here and building up stories with many of these characters who are considered bottom carders or mid carders. So there's opportunities there, but to develop the talent, and also opportunities there to help a lot of these young talents develop their mic work, develop their ability to have a feud. And that's something I want to see brought to AEW Dark, because I believe AEW Dark is being underutilized. I mean, in the beginning, they were using some guys in storylines like the Wingmen. They were using some people like Swole and Diamante in a feud, but there needs to be more storylines and not just people coming out, because you have a lot of good talent there. You have guys like Fuego, you have people like Abaddon. They're on their way, and they just need to start focusing on developing some stories around those wrestlers, because if you develop some stories around those wrestlers, that can make us care about them, not just them coming out beating up a jobber like the 80s show Wrestling Challenge. You really have to focus on developing these characters and developing their stories. Yeah, Argon 7, I know that the AEW dropped Swole, and Swole was pretty terrible overall, but she got a major push. But I would have rather seen Red Velvet get that push. I mean, Red Velvet had the work ethic, she has the drive, or I'd rather see Abaddon get the push, because she also has a good work ethic and good drive. I mean, good evening, Neostar Productions. Glad to see you here talking about AEW, because one of my viewers wanted me to talk about, All Elite Wrestling and the state of All Elite Wrestling. And when I look at the state of All Elite Wrestling, AEW is on its way, but they're having some growing pains, and they have issues that they need to work on, things like characters, things like story, and Oh, Kevin, I've been a wrestling fan ever since the mid 80s. I have been watching wrestling ever since WWF. So I have been a long-time wrestling fan. I watched WWF when the first WrestleMania came on, and I have been following wrestling off and on since the mid 80s. And I saw the NWO, I saw The Rock, I saw Stone Cold. I've been following wrestling for years. My cousin and I, we would watch wrestling all the time. And I followed AEW when it first came out, Star, because I wanted to see what they were going to do as related to their product. And I also wanted to see if this new wrestling organization would be some serious competition to WWE. And they are serious competition, but this competition really has to focus on its issues. I believe that 2021 was really a good year for AEW. They really showed that they could put together some really fantastic matches. All Out was one of the best pay-per-views they had. Then there was the St. Patrick's Day Thunder Rosa Dr. Britt Baker match, which I considered to be the match of 2021. And they've got the talent, they've got the people to put together some fantastic material. But the whole thing is that they have a real serious problem as related to character and character development and developing story and storylines. Their long form storytelling is on point, but it's their mid card and their short form storytelling that is a bit of a problem. And that's where I see AEW having serious issues is they don't really know how to develop guys on the mid card and move them up, or develop guys on the bottom card and bring them up, because they've got Brian Pillman Jr. and I believe his name is Griff Garrison. They look like a pretty solid tag team, and they're just languishing in the mid card. And they are languishing in the same thing with Fuego. They're languishing. And these characters really need to be developed. You have really good wrestlers here that you're just not using the way that you need to use them. And they're not getting the exposure that they need to get. They've shown solid ring work, and they're not really getting the exposure that they need. And also the same thing with your Malachi Black. I believe he was a mishandled character. He could be somebody who, again, another competitor for the TNT belt. And I don't see them doing enough with Malachi Black. When he came out and beat Cody, I think he should have just beaten him completely and destroyed him. But the whole thing is they wanted to give Cody a win. I wouldn't have given Cody the win. I would want to try to build him up as a threat and then have him taking on other faces as a threat. I believe your Malachi could have given Hangman a nice run for his money, and they just didn't use him properly. They have him stuck in this faction where they are the House of Black, and the House of Black could be used better. I believe they should be in a feud with the Blackpool Combat Club, or they should be out here feuding with somebody else, and they should do something with this Julia Hart storyline, which is basically she's an interesting character, but they're not really giving her the character development that she needs. She's just slow burn, but there's no payoff, and there's got to be a payoff. Now, there's other wrestlers I like in AEW, like the Acclaimed. They have really taken the gimmick and taken it to another level. The Acclaim's characters, they have really good characters, but the problem is that their AEW really hasn't given them a consistent push, but they are ready for some higher level matches. Acclaimed, really, they have the good mic work, they have the good ring work, they are ready for more, and AEW just needs to know how to manage their talent, and they need to start utilizing some of that talent and starting letting some of that talent come up. Now, the other problem they have is as talent comes up and wins the belts, they don't know what to do with talent after they lose the belts. Now, with Shida and Britt Baker, they really haven't done much with them. And again, you have to have a plan for what you're going to do with the talent after they lose a belt, and you have to have a plan for what type of story you're going to do where this character moves on to the next storyline, because stories are about endings and beginnings, and you have to have an idea of what you want to do with that character once you finish their story. Will Hobbs could be a real big time player in AEW. I easily see him with the TNT Championship, Kevin. I could really see him being a major star. I really like the guy's work ethic and I like his heart. And the thing that I think he needs to work on is his character and his mic skills because he's got the work ethic and the attitude and the ring work to be a star. But the thing that's going to get him over to that next level of main event or high up on the mid card are those mic skills. So that's another component AEW really needs to focus on because, again, wrestling is not just about the ring work and telling a story in the ring. It's about creating a compelling character. And that's where Willie Hobbs he needs to work on. I mean, Starks has the character and he has the voice, and Will Hobbs has to find the voice to become that character because, he's got the talent, but the thing that is the difference between a wrestler and a superstar is that ability to work the crowd. If you can't work the crowd, you're not going to become a superstar because people have to connect with your character. They have to care about your character and they have to get to know your character. And the only way you can do that is by talking to the audience. So talking to the audience is a major component, and Tony Khan has to focus on that. He has to focus on his wrestlers talking to the audience because that's the difference between a Ricky Starks and a Brian Cage. Ricky Starks talks to the audience. Brian Cage didn't talk to the audience. And because Brian Cage didn't talk to the audience, he didn't get over with the audience. So it is paramount that AEW wrestlers learn how to talk because learning how to talk is how you get over. Now, some wrestlers like Sammy were getting over on the BTE show or his own vlog, but the whole thing is that if you can't talk in the ring, you're not going to be able to sell the audience. Yes, those people know you from the YouTube crowd, but that's not the crowd that's watching the matches, and you need to be the guys that people are talking to when you're watching the matches. Because when The Rock did his promos, he was talking to the audience, he was talking to the crowd, and that's what got him over as a major star in wrestling. Same thing with Stone Cold. You just got to know how to talk, and they really do need somebody to help write not the booking of the mic work or stuff, but let the wrestlers do their own talking. But you have to know how to work a storyline, and that's where they need some sort of help at AEW. They need somebody to help with the storyline. Now, I know wrestling is booked on the fly, and I talked about that in one of my books, ISIS the Main Event, because I was a longtime wrestling fan, and that book, ISIS the Main Event, was basically me, paying homage to wrestling and on my love for wrestling. And then you guys can pick up ISIS the Main Event on Amazon. But that book was a tribute to wrestling, and I have been watching wrestling again ever since I was about 11 years old. So I have been watching wrestling for a long period of time. So I know how some of it works, but the whole thing is that when I look at AEW, it's a company with a lot of promise. It's a company with a lot of great talent, but the thing that they're having is growing pains as related to growing the company because they have to learn how to go out here and work their audiences, and they have to know how to develop characters that will connect with their audiences. So that's where I see them having their issues, and I also need to see them starting to take their former champs and doing a little bit more with them. I mean, they have to have a program so that they can use the already established talent. I mean, your Britt Baker should be in a feud with someone to help get somebody else over now that she's over. And just like with Jon Moxley, they need to have him in a feud with somebody to get them over. With Chris Jericho, they're doing the right thing with him helping to get 2.0 over. I see that as a thing, but they need to keep it consistent because the more people who are working to get over the more established wrestlers, the bit more stars you have on your show. So instead of just signing WWE releases, you have to have a vision for what you're going to do with that talent. And I see them picking up the right people. Keith Lee was a great pick. Picking him up, that was a no-brainer. I don't know about Swerve, but I know Keith Lee was a very solid pick. Miro was a solid pick. Brody Lee, when he was alive, was a solid pick. those are solid picks as related to talent, but you have to have a plan for what you're going to do with that talent. And that's where your AEW really needs to focus on. Where are they going to take this talent in the next 3 to 5 years? And who are they going to make their next big face? Because, yeah, you've got Hangman Page, but he's just not ready, as I see it, for the main event. And they really need to have him drop the belt to CM Punk and then have CM Punk drop the belt to MJF. If they have that flow in an organic fashion, I believe that that's going to really help AEW reestablish some prestige to the belt, and it's going to solidify the main event a bit more. Now, on the TNT Championship, again, they really have to do an overhaul on that belt and either give it to Starks or give it back to Miro because they need to put the prestige back on the belt. Scorpio Sky is a nice guy, but he's just not over. And you really need to get this belt back on someone to show that this belt is prestigious. And getting a shot at this belt means that you have risen as a star. And they also need to rebuild Murderhawk Monster, get him back to being a monster, get him back to destroying people, get him back to wrecking people, and get him back to being credible. That's another thing that I believe that they need to do. And they also need to, again, continue developing the women's division. I definitely believe they need to sign Willow Nightingale because she's really nice in the ring. And there's a lot of other talents they need to focus on. And they need to drop Nyla Rose further down the card and then build somebody else back up and make them a credible threat because the audience is tired of Nyla Rose. And it's just time to put somebody else up there, maybe Emi Sakura, maybe somebody up there, make them the next big heel. Jade is doing a great job as one of the big heels, but she needs a baby face to be a challenger. I like what they did with the Marina Shafir thing. It was funny. I mean, they talked about she was the problem, but then Jade practically solved the problem. And there's not much else for Marina to do. So that character is dead. She wasn't even getting a reaction from the crowd. So that Marina is a very boring character. So that's a character they really need to overhaul. I think they need to go hire Willow Nightingale. She's got the look, she's got the ring work, and I like another wrestler they had, Janai Kai. She's been around. They call her the Kick Demon, but I think that character has some potential. But they really need to start again letting the women start speaking, let some of the guys start speaking, develop some of these characters. I mean, yeah, you're going to have the matches, but you need to have those segments. You need to have those promos. You need to let us get to know what an all elite wrestler is. And that needs to be, as I see it, the focus for the fourth year, the focus on letting us get to know why these wrestlers are all elite, who they are. Let us get to know them as people and let us get to know them on screen, not on YouTube segments. Let us get to know them on television and let us get to know them as people. So when I look at your AEW, again, they're on their way, but there's just some tweaks that they need to do. Would like to see a little bit more Orange Cassidy. I know he's injured, but the whole thing is his bits. He needs somebody to feud with. Maybe Danhausen versus Orange Cassidy. That would be fun. That would be a fun one. I would like to see that. But there's a lot of different stories they need to do. But I look at the state of AEW again. There's areas they need to work on. They're a company with a lot of promise, but there's just areas they need to work on because right now, as I've seen it said, they're in growing pains. They really are growing, but they really need to watch how they grow because one wrong move could go the wrong way. But like what they're doing with their TNT and world titles, they really need to get those on people who can go out here and sell merchandise and work the crowd. They really need to get their belts on people who can be a face for the company. And they've done a great job of moving past Cody Rhodes. And I really commend Tony Khan for being professional about Cody Rhodes and moving on because that's just how the business is. And he's done a great job of setting up shows after Cody Rhodes wound up leaving. And the shows flow nicely, but there just needs to be that spark to get them super over. I mean, they're one step away from making their shows a lot better. And the whole thing is that they have to put the right person with the belts and they have to make the belts feel like something valuable once again. And they also have to go out here and be able to develop characters, because characters are what sell wrestling. I mean, if your characters can't talk, they're not going to be able to work the crowd. And sadly, that's one of the problems with many AEW wrestlers is a lot of them, they don't talk to the audience, and that's why a lot of them are struggling to get over. And that's something Tony Khan really has to work on is promos, work on developing characters and stories, and you have to go out here and create characters who have voices, and that's something I really want to see done over at AEW. I really want to see the all elite wrestlers showing that they're not only all elite in the ring, but they're all elite as related to their interpersonal skills and connecting with the audience and working the crowd. So before I want you guys to pick up the ISIS Legacy on Amazon.com, along with ISIS the Main Event and Eastern Horror of the Hyena Woman. So really would love you guys to pick up these books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format, because I'm working hard for some weekend book sales, and I want to get some book sales for these books. And I also want everybody to check out ISIS the Main Event, because this book was written out of my love for wrestling. So I have been watching wrestling for over 30 years. So when my viewer asked me to talk about AEW, I could not say no. I mean, this is a subject that I have a lot of knowledge in. I really have a lot of experience watching a lot of wrestling, and wrestling taught me how to write better comic panels. Wrestling taught me how to write better fight scenes. I mean, the whole sport of wrestling taught me all of these different skills. And if it wasn't for wrestling, I wouldn't know how to write a good fight sequence. And that's one of the things that I learned from watching wrestling for over 30 years. So wrestling, a lot of people don't understand what it relates to stories, but it relates heavily to comic books, because wrestlers are like superheroes. Wrestlers are larger than life. And wrestlers, they go out here and put on a show every night, working hard. And I have nothing but respect for most pro wrestlers. And that's why one of the reasons why I love AEW is that most of your pro wrestlers, again, they put on these shows, work hard, and they put together some really great work. And I really get to see pro wrestling and not sports entertainment, because the problem with sports entertainment is that it's just too focused on gimmicks and stuff and not really focused on developing characters and story, or developing ring work in an organic fashion. And that's the big difference between AEW and WWE. AEW is pro wrestling, WWE is sports entertainment, and AEW is a far better product because it's focused on pro wrestling. And that's one of the reasons I like watching AEW. And I practically watch all of the shows from Dark Elevation to Dark to Dynamite and Rampage. And that's something that I really enjoy watching, and I want to see AEW get better. And I jump at the chance to make this live stream because the viewer asked me to talk about the state of AEW, so I had to talk about it because I've been watching it for years, and I really want to see AEW take itself to the next level, because I believe it could be bigger than WCW and even bigger than WWE. All Tony Khan has to do is focus on his product, focus on cleaning up the quality of his product, and I believe he can take his product to the next level. And with that being said, I'm going to get ready to wrap up tonight's stream. If you guys want to see me do more live streams, you guys can donate to the Cash App by clicking the links in the chat, and that money will help me be able to do more live streams. And that'll help me be able to do more shows like this. I really like doing more shows like this, like the comic shows and the sci-fi and fantasy shows. And I would love to do more of these kind of shows, but I need to see the support and the viewers. So if you guys would hit up the Cash App, it would be greatly appreciated. And if you guys could pick up ISIS the Main Event, that would also be greatly appreciated. So I'm going to get ready to wrap up tonight's stream. And I want to thank everybody for coming out to tonight's stream. And I hope you'll be there for next week's stream. Have a great weekend and have a good night.